in the comments below. Give me your favorite off-grid ideas of pie in the sky, free energy, free love, whatever. What are the things that you think would be the best thing ever, right up until you actually had to put the shovel in the ground and make it happen? And that's the kind of thing that gets me all the time is I see these ideas, you know, the research looks great. It's like, oh my God, you build it once, and this is kind of the point. If you could build it once, you would probably get, 10 or 20 years of return or the rest of your life. Hello, and welcome to, Carlin's Worlds. Yeah, that should work. I'm a wanderer, a tinkerer, sometimes a nomad, a military veteran. I do things differently. There will be tinkering. I have a motorcycle, a truck, and a school bus. I live off-grid, so there will be some solar, batteries, inverters, and maybe even some wind. It blows. And that's all I can fit into about 30 seconds. Oh, and please, if you like any of this, it would be really awesome if you could subscribe and click that notify bell. Drop a comment if you have any questions or ideas. Share, like, comment, subscribe, notify. Oh, and Patreon if you're really an awesome kind of person. Cool. On with the show already. Okay, today is January 24th. I've got about a week left out here before I hit the road. If you haven't seen my other video, my plan is to go truck driving. I'm leaving the Postal Service. I got about a week left. And sorry about the wind. It wasn't blowing a minute ago. Some of this is just for myself. I just wanted to kind of do a walk around video and sort of see what things look like now. Haven't been out here 2 years yet, but yeah, the wind's gonna be a problem, isn't it? This plastic still has not shredded. I am just dumbstruck. It is flexed a little bit. There's a slice down there. I think I dropped something into that. It makes noise in the wind. You can see it's kind of distressed here where it's been pulling against the sharper edge. I don't know if that shows up or not, but it's holding up. That's 3.5 mil plastic from Home Depot. It wasn't particularly expensive. I got a bunch of it, and if I ever get around to doing a greenhouse, that's how I'm going to start it. It's just, it works well enough. And the rain gutters, and I'm just using trash cans to catch the water in. Last summer, I had 2 or 3 months where I did laundry and didn't need to go to town with the tank to go get more water. I had enough rain that I was catching that I was able to do laundry and showers. Oh, also I do hang some clothes in here for drying, so that's just more because it was an easy place to put them, kind of thing. I lowered the bus a little bit when I parked it. I dug holes and dropped the bus down. That got me closer to the ground. That one of the advantages of that was that my skirting didn't have to be as big. So these are 16-inch pieces, so I ripped an OSB into thirds. I got a shovel and I can dig a hole just as fast or faster. So that's how I did it. I dug holes deeper and got the bus to sit pretty level. That worked out pretty well. This is what I was talking about with the window replacement panels earlier. What I did, I made partial frames out of 2x4s, cut the OSB to size, and then on the inside there is some of that pink styrofoam insulation that's over there. I glued it and bonded it all together, and from the inside these panels fit in where the windows were. So I removed the windows, put these in their place, and I think they're insulated a whole lot better, plus they don't leak. The bus windows, just air would blow through them because they don't seal very well, especially when they're 20 years old. That's one of the motorcycle ramps, and it was in the way all the time, and I thought about it. I'm like, well, why don't I just make a little mini sidewalk, so whenever I walk into the bus, I walk across that. I have seen a pretty good reduction on how much dirt follows me in. This project was for doing motorcycle maintenance because it was awkward trying to keep the bike on a stand in the sand. it would always tip over on me. So I just made that sidewalk specifically for the bike to park on, the motorcycle, such that I could tie it down, I could jack it up, I could do what I needed to do. Well, after building that, it never even occurred to me at the time to build an actual sidewalk for me. This was just for the motorcycle. So probably sometime I'm going to take the same idea and build another one just going off to there. Then I have a nice sidewalk to walk in. That'll knock a lot of the dust off my boots when I come in. That seems like a good idea. Obviously you can hear the generator in the background. Doing laundry, I can't do that on solar yet. All of this we've got videos on already. That was the Harbor Freight solar kits. That's actually 3 separate kits ran in parallel together. This is a generator I picked up at Northern Tools for a couple $100 on sale. That's a 4,000 watt generator. About an $80 MPPT controller. That's a 1,500 watt inverter. 4 deep cycle batteries that I picked up at Walmart. Harbor Freight battery charger that I use to top off the batteries when I am running the generator. A little bit of distilled water that I keep forgetting to put in the batteries. This generator I bought, mainly I use it for the dryer. It's a 9,000 watt. I also got that at Northern Tools. And I mentioned somewhere in the video stabilizing blocks. I made these out of OSB and 2x4s. There's another set of videos about that. These make so much difference. I jacked up the bus a little bit, set these under the body, and then set it back down again. And there you go. Oh, coffee's done. If you're already doing laundry, running the generator, that's a good time to make coffee. Now, I can do coffee off of the inverter, but if you're running the generator anyway, this just saves you a hit on the batteries. Later on, when I'm running the last of the dryer loads, I'm going to be running my hot water heater so I can take a shower. White bucket, that's my quote-unquote composting toilet. It's actually working remarkably well. Peat moss, that's what I use. I dump it in on top when I'm done with the toilet. Simple and works. I haven't invented the bucket yet. I very seldom ever smell it. I just put a little sprinkle of peat moss on top each day. I don't mix it or anything, and that's it. Okay. Tool shelves. I don't need these on. Nothing to charge. Unfinished project, but it was a good start. We'll come back and deal with that later. As it is, I can pick this thing up, take it outside. When I'm using tools, it makes it really handy. It's really noisy. Anyway, moving on. The last couple weeks I have really tried to declutter in here, and it's better. I've almost got a bench I can work on now. So yeah, this shelf is one that I built. That shelf is one I built recently. That's made a huge difference. This shelf was here from before. There's the table saw, welders down underneath. I keep as many of the tools close to the door as I can, so when I'm getting ready to do something, I pick it up, put it on the floor, walk outside, pick it up and walk it out. That kind of a thing. Alright. Oh, and the shower. 17-gallon plastic tub, I guess. It's got a little hole cut in it with a bulkhead fitting that goes out to the garden hose. And that goes down through a drain. I am going to come back to this, I just haven't finished it yet. 7-gallon, 120 volt, about 2,500 watt water heater. It's enough to take a shower, if you're fast. I just use a utility sink faucet and some hose clamps going on there. That works good enough. I can reach out, turn it on, turn it off. I just usually shower straight hot water Rather than letting that get up to full temperature and then mixing it, I just run the generator long enough to get the water hot enough to take a shower, and then take a quick shower, and then I'm done. Simpler, right? I like this better. I used to have another table like this that went over the wheel hump. Wheel humps are always an issue. This is a good utility shelf. For winter time, a couple mods. One of my friends from the Navy talked about this. These are the Harbor Freight moving blankets. Makes a pretty effective temporary wall. So when I'm in the front running the heater, I just drop the blanket down, take one of the clamps, hold it sort of close together. It does make a big difference. There's a thermometer way back there. I can have it 10 or 15 degrees warmer in the front than in the back, and it keeps the heat from going to the back when I'm not back there. So it does work. And I just used a piece of black plastic flexible pipe and some decking screws or wood screws, and screwed the pipe right to the ceiling, and that works good enough, right? A couple of the screws actually go right through the blanket to hold it in place, and we're done. It's a lot simpler. That's just a mess. I pulled the wiring access panels down. I didn't finish it, but about 3/4 of them are down now. And that's when I realized that there was huge gaps in the insulation. That'll be a future project. I haven't quite decided what I want to do with that. I am going to probably buy some more fiberglass batting like that and stuff it up as far as I can, and then make something, maybe beadboard, and go across it. I've had some ideas for ceiling insulation and stuff, and I just haven't got around to it yet. One of the things that's holding me back though is I really like having a metal ceiling for the magnets, because I can stick things everywhere. Anything I do to the ceiling is going to mean that I can't stick things to my ceiling anymore. It's odd, but, and I think I would miss all my bus stickers. You know, anything that was on the ceiling I just left. Laziness mostly. The other half of the winter project was this tent I made out of the bubble wrap. This is Mylar Face, what they call foil over bubble wrap insulation, and it is amazing. It's kind of the same idea as a space blanket, plus it's got the bubble wrap. It is a really good insulator. I bought this in a 100-foot roll. I actually bought it off of Amazon. The local hardware stores like Home Depot, they'll have the silver face, but this is white on one side and silver on the other. I just thought it looked nicer. But it doesn't, I would think that the silver on both sides maybe would be even better, and it's available at most hardware stores. Easy to cut with scissors, doesn't weigh anything, you know. This I bought in a 100-foot roll. I think it was 4 feet wide. I've still got some left, so it's good for little projects like that. But when I'm inside, I mean, like this morning, it was about 33 degrees when I woke up out here, and I slept in, you know, I've got a horse blanket and a fairly thin comforter, and that's it. It's, you know, I've got a really good cold weather sleeping bag that I made for my Alaska motorcycle trip, which I woke up with frost on me and the bag kept me warm, kind of thing. Literally, I had frost on me. But I really haven't felt like I needed it, so I just stayed with this. So there you go. Normally when I'm sitting here, that's what the camera is sitting on. This is a monitor stand for dual 24-inch monitors, and I just put the bracket on here and have the camera tripod head that sits on there. So that's, you know, if I do the talking head videos, that's where I'm sitting. At the moment, I'm experimenting with, if I say Raspberry Pi, you're going to think I'm making cooking or something like that. This one up here is one. This is about a $30 computer. You can do HD video. You can use it for playing movies. It's got USB ports. It is powered off of a USB port. It has networking built in. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got all your cool stuff. It also happens to use very, very little power, even with the little display I got. This is a 10-inch 12-volt display made for using in your car or whatever. I use that as much as I can, which means that I don't use the laptop. The laptop uses a lot more power. One of the things when I'm first editing video, the first time I look at the video that I've shot like this, I'll watch it on this one first and make notes and decide if I want to even work with that clip or just delete it. Then when I get to the actual finished editing, it goes on the laptop. But the process then is, the first time I see it, I'm not wasting all the power. And this is running directly off of 12-volt batteries. It doesn't need the inverter. And to power it, I've just got a cigarette lighter style adapter that has USB ports on it. And this one I happened to get just recently. It shows you the battery voltage all the time. And that is coming off of one of these switches up here. Going off-grid, in theory, it could save you a lot of money if you're careful. It's real easy to get pulled in over your head. Definitely not one size fits all. Things I've done maybe wouldn't make sense for you. If you've got a family, if you've got kids, if you've got a wife or husband, that might change things. I'm out here by myself, and so there's things that I can do, I can get away with, that if I had kids, I'd have to make different choices. Alright? For instance, I run very minimal heat out here. I didn't really show the heater, but I'm running a Mr. Heater portable buddy heater, a little propane heater. That thing is amazing. But I don't run it when I'm sleeping. That's one of the reasons I made the tent. I didn't feel comfortable running it overnight, especially with the odd chance that it might get kicked over. It's supposed to shut itself off, but you know, you don't want to take that chance if you can help it. So since I'm only dealing with 30-degree weather, I'm not dealing with minus 30-degree weather, I could get away with it. You know, with a good blanket, I'm usually fine. So, you know, but I grew up in a cold climate, and I'm pretty durable. I don't get sick very often. I eat a lot of cough drops, but I don't really catch colds or, you know, get pneumonia or anything like that so far. So that kind of, like, you know, it lets me make different choices. I can make a decision. It's like, okay, I can spend my money on this instead of on this. One thing I am looking at, possibly for next year, and it really depends how much time am I going to spend out here now. Earlier video that released this week, today's the 24th, I have turned in my notice to the Postal Service. I'm going to be going and getting trained for driving semi-trucks. Assuming I pass and everything goes well there, my plan is to spend time out on the road a lot for the next 3 to 5 years. The goal then is to pay off the loan for the land, and if I can be gone and not sitting here looking around at all the things I want to buy, I should be able to put more money into the land payments and not have to spend money on everything else. You know, I could say trinkets, but there's a lot of projects that, yes, I could definitely spend money on out here. The window project, replacing windows, I did 6, 3 on each side. I probably will do 3 or 4 more. And the more I looked at it, I'm like, I really liked having daylight coming in. So I didn't want to cover up all of them. But they did make a pretty good difference on how warm it is in here on a colder day. Insulating the ceiling, finishing the skirting. Okay, this would be the, okay, let me just back up a second. I'm gonna make a new little check mark or bullet point, you know, boink, bullet point. Things I would do if I was looking with what I knew now, if I was just gonna come out here again and start over fresh, what would I do? Okay. Things to think about, at least. If possible, do some of the bus conversion before you move into it. With all of this stuff, it is a freaking nightmare to get anything done, because aside from the 2 little sheds that I got out here, everything I own is in here. And it's a real giant pain to do anything like that. simple things just don't get done because I have to figure out, move everything out for 6 feet, take it all outside, do something, put it back in again. So that would be one thing to look at. Is neighbors up the way, they've got a big army tent. That might be something to think about, excepting for the wind. Although, I mean, army tents are made to survive the wind. I actually thought of one before I even saw his. I laughed when I saw it. And I'm like, yeah, that's an idea, or build a couple sheds. If you go buy a shed, it's going to cost you too much money. But it's always been on my radar. I really wanted to build a shop so I could do work, not for anybody else, but just I could have a workshop. I could put my tools in, and so on. And one of the things that I kept looking at is building a shop would have let me take everything out of the bus, put it in the shop for 3 months or whatever. I could have lived in the shop, converted the bus, and then brought what I needed into the bus for living. And then I would have had the shop to do my projects. All right. So that would be a pretty good idea, As far as the bus itself, spend some time, level it first. Then build those boxes that I showed on the previous sequence. And what it was, I just made a cube out of 2x4s and then skinned it with OSB. That's how they build houses. It's pretty strong. Okay. Glue and screw and off you go. And then I used my floor jack. Since I used to be a mechanic, I have a floor jack, but you could do the same thing with hydraulic jacks or whatever. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant. But I lifted the bus a few inches, put these boxes in place. I scraped the dirt out from underneath to get it nice and flat. I let the bus back down. This thing feels so solid. If you ever get a chance, if you've ever gone camping, or if you know somebody that's got a camping trailer, walk into the trailer, or do this at a sales lot. Go walk through a few trailers, and take note of if they have the stabilizers down or not. Okay. Usually they've got little jacks or little scissor jacks or blocks or something they put up under the frame. Because when you first walk in, this thing just rocks back and forth. I mean, it's a bus. It was made for 60 kids or something like that, right? I forget. 80 kids? 60 kids? Whatever. A lot of kids, right? So it's not like it was overloaded, but just me walking through it, you could feel it rocking. Now in a few seconds, the washing machine is going to go into spin cycle for the last time, and everything's going to go. But the stabilizers that I built make a huge difference. Okay. So level it first. And that could be something as simple as I used a shovel and I dug little holes in front of each wheel and then rolled the bus into the holes, walked around with the level and figured out which side was high. Back the bus out of the hole, dig it a little bit deeper on one wheel, drop it in and check it, and do that 2 or 3 times until you're really close, okay? And then you're done, you'd leave it alone. So level it first, somehow stabilize it. Those boxes I made worked really good. Once you got it stabilized, I would say go right into skirting it. And what I did, there were some videos I did on that, but I just used OSB because I lowered the bus closer to the ground when I was leveling it. I was able to use 16-inch pieces of OSB, and I attached it with basically scraps of 2x4 to the bus. And then I went around with a shovel and I bermed dirt over the bottom edge. And there's a few spots where rabbits or rats or mice or somebody has crawled underneath. But I kind of just made a decision that I wasn't going to worry about them too much. Yeah, the rats have caused some damage. But for right now, I'm not going to worry about it too much, because if I poison them, no good could come of that. Yeah, you kill the rat, but what usually happens is okay, here comes the spin cycle. If you poison the rat will crawl into some place and then die, and then you can't get him out, right? Or the neighbor's dog will eat the poison rat, and now you kill the neighbor's dog, Or the rabbit gets into the poison, and you kill the rabbit. And I feel bad about that, I'm not a big fan of the neighbor's dogs, but I don't want to go killing them either, Or, you know, the rat gets sick, goes out in the desert, and then a coyote eats it. You know, and coyotes, I mean, in an ecosystem like this, and I don't usually use that kind of big words, but everything is here for a reason, you know. Even the rattlesnakes, you know, the more I learn about it, the reason I see so many rattlesnakes around the bus is they're here looking for the rats. So if I can not kill the rattlesnake, he's going to eat all the mice and then leave. So that's, you know, it's kind of a good thing. So I try to leave the snakes alone. Just let them be. As long as I don't step on them. You know, if they're right next to the door, I throw dirt at them with a shovel, and they usually move somewhere else. Your desert might be different. Water catchment, water systems, huge investment in time and energy and payoff. Anything, I mean, because like where I'm at, I can go into town and I can get water. And I set up an account. It costs me $43 every month, regardless of how much water I get. If I go above 2,000 or 3,000 gallons, I don't remember the exact threshold. I've never gotten anywhere close to it because I don't have animals. But the lowest threshold is like 2,000 gallons, I think. The tank I have is a 200-gallon tank, so I could go. What's that work out to 10 times? So once every 3 days, I could haul 200 gallons before I hit my limit for the month. Okay, it's not really something I worry about. I don't really need that much water. You know, coffee and lemonade. So anyway, the water system that I made was overly complicated. My reason for going that direction is I had planned on either making concrete tanks or buying more tanks. And either one of those could happen still. I will probably at least try to make one concrete tank. It's as much a matter of time as money right now. The amount of time that it takes to build something, you just kind of look at it and you're like, okay, if I have a good payday, I could go spend a couple $100 and buy another tank and be done. You know, or I could waste my whole 2 days off screwing around with this thing, and it may not work. Maybe I make the stupid tank and then it leaks. Then I'm sad because I just dumped 200 gallons into it, and it'll be full before it bursts, and then I just lost 200 gallons. You know, cactuses would bloom, and that would be about the end of it. So a lot of people in the comments will have all these great ideas. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. And yeah, I get that. I mean, one example, I'm going to jump ship just a little bit here. The tank, the video I made for refilling 1-pound propane tanks, I've just been amazed at how many comments are on that video. And by the end of the process, and I have filled a few tanks since then, but in my experience, and this is completely my experience, my opinion, I found that for the time and the money, it wasn't worth my time to refill a 1-pound canister. Now, everybody's going to be different on that, all right? What I did instead is I bought the 15-pound tank, and Mr. Heater makes an adapter kit that you can run a hose from the 15-pound tank to your heater. To me, that makes way more sense. Instead of, because a 1-pound tank, when it's full when you buy it, isn't enough to run a full night on my heater. Now, I don't run the heater at night anyway, but let's say it would last 8 hours, okay, on 1 pound. That's probably about right. Okay. The last one that I checked, I ran it 3 weeks on 15 pounds. Okay. Now I'm not sitting there halfway through the night. Oh, the little 1-pound canister is empty. Let me take it off and put another one on. No. 2 or 3 weeks later, I just grab another 15-pound tank and put it on. And these are only 15 pounds. If you're really running heat, go buy a 20 or 30-pound. But what I'm doing, outside of Walmart and a lot of other places, they have those propane tank exchange system. Okay. So you go into the cashier and you say, okay, I want a tank. First time, it's up on the wall, I got it wrote down, $43 for a new tank. Pay him $43 and change, whatever it comes out to. They give me a 15-pound tank and off I go. Now I own that tank. Next time I take it back and it's about $15 to exchange it. I don't have to wait for the guy to fill it up. I just give them one tank, they give me another tank. It's painted, it's clean, it's ready to go. Boom, take it home. Okay. Now it's $15 for 15 pounds. Okay. I think the little green 1-pounders are $3.50 a piece. Okay, so that's $3.50 for 1 pound. The exchange comes down to $1 a pound after the first one. Okay. And I got for $15 3 weeks of heat. Now I'm not running it constantly because I work. I leave here every day and I come back. Right. And if it's not a cold day or a cold night, I don't run the heat. You know, I run the heat when it gets about 40, 45 is my comfort zone. You know, if like now, well, what is it now? It's pretty warm right now. It's like 73 degrees, so obviously I'm not running the heat. Everybody's going to be different. Okay. But if I have the heater sitting fairly close to me and it's shining on me, it's a radiant heater, and if I close the moving blankets that are halfway back, all that heat is in the front half of the bus. Alright, I'm not heating the whole bus. Works for me, right? Everybody's going to be different though, so that's cool. I mentioned that because I also was looking at one of the ideas I had was I could get, okay, I'll hit this thought and then I'll end this real quick. For about $300 to $400, I can buy an RV furnace. It's a brand new furnace. They're typically not packaged. These are probably bought in bulk for RV companies, and then they're either surplus, they change the models, I'm not sure the exact details. But look on eBay for RV furnace and you'll see what I'm talking about. I don't remember the exact ratings or anything like that, but the idea is they're made to run on propane and they're made to run on 12 volts. To me, that seems like a really good idea. They have control boards, they have sensors. It's an actual furnace, it's not just a heater. So it works like a furnace would, so it's got about the same safety level. In fact, it's probably at least as safe as the one in your house because it's also got to be DOT approved. It's in a motorhome, okay? So I really looked at that. I decided not to do it for this winter. Now that I'm going to be looking at truck driving, I don't know if I'm going to buy it for next winter either, but eventually I probably will. Because then I could run it overnight. I would feel safe enough to do it. It's made to run, you know, without, you know, you would build it in, you know, build cabinets around it, you can run ducting, it's got low oxygen shut-off sensors, and, you know, if the pilot light goes out, it'll shut the gas down, or, you know, it's got all the valves and, you know, the control circuit and everything, so it's probably an order of magnitude safer than a portable heater would be. That's the idea. So that's on the list, but the more I think about it, I'm like, it's between $60 and $80 if you can get them on sale for the portable buddy heater. So if it's $80, you can get what, six of these for the furnace kind of thing. I'm cheap, you know. I'm gonna go that way. Shut the generator off. I'm gonna let the clothesline dry for a little bit. Things I would give as advice for somebody. Here's a big one. Test small. Test cheap. Don't get too married to an idea right off the bat. That's something I probably could have learned sooner. Some things I did that on, and some things I went the other way. So, for example, when I made the water system out there, I started talking about that, and then I kind of got sidetracked. The reason for setting it up with all the risers and setting it up for multiple tanks is obviously for growth. You know, I knew one tank probably wouldn't be enough, and I was looking at being able to harvest rainwater. And what I was looking at is get one tank in place first, and then as you know, as I had money, I'd buy more tanks and just keep adding to it. Because I was using PVC pipe, and the tank, both tanks were already set up for 2-inch pipe or 2-inch fittings. And I had the green hose, it was a 2-inch hose, because that's at the water place they have an option, you can fill with a garden hose or you can fill with 2-inch. So I figured if I made the investment once, you'd never look back. And I didn't want to have to do it with a pump. I figured if I could set myself up that I could let it gravity feed, just open the valve and just let it run, and if that would work, great. That's one less thing I don't have to deal with. You know, if I don't have to go buy a pump right away, that makes life just a lot easier. Okay. Gravity feeding through a garden hose takes forever. It's agony. It'll get there, but oh man, is it slow. You know, and you don't have to sit there and watch it, but at the same time, it would be nice if it got done, you know, sometime in your lifetime. So if you can do it, 2 inches is the way to go. Or whatever. Make your own decisions. Pipe is cheap. I think the pipe, if in quantity, if I bought 10 pipes of 2-inch, they're 10 feet long, PVC, schedule 40 or schedule 80 even. I don't remember, I'm not really a plumber. I think it was $6.50 a pipe when you got 10 of them. Otherwise, it's $8 a pipe. It's not a big deal. I've used about 120 feet of pipe out there, or some ridiculous number. It seemed like a lot of pipe. But then it's done. You don't have to mess with it. It was the fittings that kill you. You know, T-fittings and the valves. I got big ball valves. They're, you know, $15 valves, and I've got 8 of them or something like that. Maybe 1 inch would have been better. It would have been a lot cheaper on the valves. So think about that. Because I wanted to bury the pipe, though, and glue all the fittings, with the pipe buried, it's very difficult to dig it up, splice a new piece in, and get it in there. At least that's been my experience. I'm sure some people can do it, but if you got a series of pipe that's buried, and you cut it and then try to put a T-fitting in, you got to be able to push the pipes apart to get the T in and then pull them back together again. Well, how are you going to do that when it's buried on both ends? That just seemed really difficult to me. There's probably a smarter way to do it that I haven't figured out, so you know, post that in the comments. But I thought if I at all can get everything in place that I needed to put, and then that part is done. All right. So going forward, what I will be able to do, and I haven't added this part in yet, but the rain gutters, right now I'm just having them go down into trash cans because it was easier. When it rains here, it rains very fast and then it stops. We get the monsoon rain. It's like tropical monsoons. This last year we didn't get very much rain compared to the year before. The year before it was massive rain. Road washed out several times. I was stuck. I couldn't get out. You know, I couldn't get off the property. The road was washed out. And then eventually the water would go down, and I figured out when to go. And it got to the point that I realized that if I left here at the right time, I could get out before the rain, and then by the time I got home, it had time for the water to go back down again. You know, live and learn kind of thing. But I did miss a few days of work because of that. And every time I'd be stuck out here, I'd walk around and take a bunch of pictures and shoot lots of videos. So if my supervisor ever questioned me, I'm like, okay, here's where I live, and here's the puddle that I can't get crossed. You know, they always say, you know, don't drown, you know, turn around. So I'm like, well, you can't give me the safety lesson and then expect me to drive through the running water. Anyway, they never give me a hard time about it. So, but yeah, don't get too married to an idea. You know, maybe it would have been smarter. I could have done that a lot simpler. I could have laid flex hoses out, transferred the water, you know, and then rolled up the hoses when I'm done. You know, I could have had that done weeks sooner, pretty much. Now, looking at it, end of the year, I've only got one tank on the system. I never did add any more tanks. That was something I expected to have done by now. Right. I still want, there's a giant hole over there I started digging, and every once in a while I'll go out there and I'll whack at it for a few days and then I'll stop, and it's, it taunts me every time I look at it. I'm like, yeah, I never did finish digging that hole. That's where I would like to build one of the concrete tanks. Yeah, that's almost a swimming pool. The amount of water I could store in there, though, if I could fill that up during the rainy part of the year, I probably wouldn't have to haul water anymore. So, a little bit you look at, okay, investments and systems, right? Everything that I do makes my life better. And that's a good way to look at it, because, I've got 6 or 8 trash cans, right? 30-gallon trash cans, 45-gallon trash cans. I got a few of everything. I bought those once. They typically don't break, and they are strong enough to hold water. I've tested that. Now, get the heavier duty ones, don't get the cheapest ones you can get. But if it rains and you can get the rain gutter to run down the downspout and fill up the trash can, now you got 30 gallons of water that was lost otherwise. It's free water, right? I can do laundry out of that. I can take a sump pump, drop it in the trash can, hook it up to the inverter, not even run the generator, and I can fill up the washing machine with rainwater. That's free, right? And I did that this last summer. I've done probably 10 or 15 loads of laundry that were rainwater. I didn't have to go to town to get that. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Systems. Think about where you're going to spend your time. And out here, I like the phrase sweat equity. Because there's some things that I can do with a shovel, just digging a hole or shoveling dirt up against something. That's good enough. I don't have to go, for instance, I don't have to do concrete when I built the shed. I just dug a hole with a post hole digger, manual, not the gas powered one. Dropped the 2x4 into it, poured the sand back into the hole around it, took a 2x4, packed it down. That's remarkably solid. Yeah, concrete would be a little bit better. This was free. It just took a little bit of time. The windbreak out here. That's how I did that. It's less than 2 feet deep into the sand. I have seen it move a little bit in the wind, but not very much. It's good enough, right? The windbreak is functional. On windy days, it makes a difference. And I think this winter it's made a difference of how much wind has blown under the bus. Because we've had days where it was just constant wind. But since the bus is kind of behind the windbreak, since I didn't finish doing the skirting yet, that has reduced how much wind has blown under the bus. And on a cold day, that makes a difference. Also makes it a little bit quieter and you feel the wind a little bit less, So it's little things like that, they add up. But some examples of things that didn't work the way I thought they would yet. Some things you just have to try it to see. Solar water heating. By the time I get around to doing it, it's so late in the year it's not really effective. In the summer, it's 100 degrees out here. So I really don't need hot water, right? So I would take, there would be times where I would pull water out of one of the trash cans that had been sitting in the sun, and that was almost warmer than you needed it to be. It was almost too warm. You were looking forward to kind of a cool shower in the evening, and that was pretty warm. Okay. By winter time, the sun is low, and that trash can full of water, since it's exposed to the air, has cooled down quite a bit overnight. So by morning it's about, it's cold, it's ambient temperature, the sun does warm it up, but the sun is so low in the sky, and we're in Texas, so this is, further south. I'm used to living, I lived in Canada, where the sun is really low and the days are really short. Yes, the sun will heat it, but it's not nearly enough to take a shower from. Not like that. I did a brief experiment with that black plastic pipe on the roof of what I call the shade awning, the one with the galvanized roof. I coiled up some black plastic pipe and just left it in the sun. That I couldn't get to seal very well, so I ended up using garden hose instead. It did get warmer, so it's worth doing, but it wasn't hot enough to take a shower from. I feel that the money I spent on the hot water heater was worth it. The hot water heater I bought runs on 120 volts. It'll run on a 20 amp circuit. So my littler generator will easily run it, as long as you're not running something else. Like if you run the microwave and the hot water heater, it won't go. It'll pop the circuit. So you kind of look at that. So winters, I'll run the hot water heater, and then once it starts warming up, then I don't do it anymore. I just run, ambient, quote unquote, room temperature water, because that water is close to 95 or 100 degrees, and when it's 100 degrees outside, that actually feels pretty good. So you don't have to do it then. That's an idea I have a hard time letting go of, though. It would make sense to spend some time and make a proper solar water heater, I think. It's just, again, my idea was the time you spend on something and the money for materials at the end of the project, is it good enough to use, or do you still end up wishing it was a little bit hotter or something? And when you don't have a lot of money to start with, you kind of have to be careful which experiments you take on, because you could spend a lot of money on something that doesn't end up working for you. On YouTube, I have seen a lot of people's experiments for solar water heaters, and I know it works because with the black plastic pipe, water was definitely warmer coming out of it. It's not hard to imagine that it would work. It's more a matter of, is it worth the... I think in the end, yes, it is worth the time and the experience and the expense of building it, because once you've built it, it should last a long time. Okay. I think the idea I like the best of the ones that I've seen, the guy was using copper pipe. He was soldering the copper pipe together, like how you would do a proper copper plumbing system. And he was also basically soldering or brazing the copper pipe to galvanized roofing. So your galvanized has got the corrugations, right? So he would lay the pipe down into the valley, and then probably skip to, and then another pipe, and then it's just a matter of how much can you afford. I think, man, if you had 1-inch pipe or 2-inch pipe, it would be even better if you could pull it and then run water into that and out of it again. The idea was he painted the pipe black and the corrugated black, so it just trapped a whole bunch of energy, the solar. And it's kind of the opposite of cooling fins. If you look at like a radiator, you got lots of air going through the fins that cools it down. Well, if you had lots of surface area, the sun shines on it, and that would just hold all that heat and put it into the pipe, because copper is a good heat conductor. Okay, the next part of that I've seen, you build that into a box, insulate the box, and on the front face of the box, so you have like a 5-sided box, the 6th side is a window. Now, depending on how far you want to go, you could take something like plexiglass, and that would keep the cold air from blowing through your heater, right? So it's like sitting, in front of a window on a cold day. The sun shines in, warms you up, you feel good, right? That's where all the cats always sit. Well, if you think about it, if you put your solar collector inside of a structure that the sun could shine through the window and heat everything up, but then the cold air wouldn't get to it to cool it back down, because that's one of the biggest problems is overnight all that pipe gets cold and all that water, you know, the temperature starts to drop. So it takes it half the day just to get it from being really cold up to warm, and then you're trying to get it up to hot enough to take a shower from. One thing that I'm looking at, because I'm experimenting with things like, you know, I mentioned the Raspberry Pi, and also Arduino is basically the same kind of an idea. I don't know that, you know, 2019 is going to be the year I get to do that yet, but there are things like temperature sensors that can work with the Arduinos. And you could also do, well, a whole bunch of sensors, but temperature is the easiest one. If you can measure the water temperature and then use electrically controlled valves like they have for irrigation, and then turn on a pump, then it would be a simple enough thing, I think, to, in the morning, okay, so let's do it this way. End of the day, when the sun has finished heating your water, it's no longer getting hotter, open some valves, drain your solar heater collector back into a storage tank like a hot water heater, an insulated tank. That would stay warmer there than it would up on the roof or wherever your solar collector is. Okay. Use the hot water. Next morning, pump cold water into the solar collector. Then it's got all day to heat up again. One idea that I've been playing with in my mind, I haven't really gone forward with it yet, but say your pipe, there's a formula, and I don't have it handy, but there's a formula that says that if you got a 10-foot pipe that's 2 inches in diameter, it holds X amount of gallons. Okay. And I started playing with that when I was doing the water manifold. I was watching that, and I'm like, I think my manifold holds 100 gallons of water just in the pipes, regardless of the tanks. So if you knew that, figure out how many gallons of hot water do you need for your shower. Right now I'm using a 7-gallon hot water heater, and that's just on the low end, but it works if you're quick. You basically get wet, lather up. While you're lathering, the water shuts off, or you shut the water off. Get lathered up, turn the water back on and rinse, and then you have enough water. You can't just let it run. Okay. So figure out how much do you need, and that's how much pipe you go by. Then you could set it up like on the roof of the bus where the sun would shine on it. Plus you'd have the advantage then of the water would drain from the roof down because you got gravity. It's not very much pressure from that high, but you could have a storage tank, maybe put it under the bus that was insulated and protected. End of the day, when the sun is finished heating the water, open up some valves, let the water run down into your storage tank. The storage tank could feed your water pump. Something like that. Play around with it a little bit. Okay, so the other half of that was by using sensors and electrically controlled valves and an electric pump for a recirculating pump. What you could do is let the water sit in the collector up high. When it got up to a certain temperature, the little mini computer, the Arduino, would say, okay, that water is up to 120 degrees. Open the valves, turn on the pump. Push that back through the loop down into your water tank. Pump fresh water back up. And by circulating it, eventually you'd end up with 20 or 40 gallons of hot water. That's useful, right? That's more than you need for an off-grid shower, I'll say, or a Navy shower. It's just you know, if you're in there longer than that, you're just wasting water. Okay. But if you had extra water at the end of your shower, you could run that through radiant heating and use it to heat your bus. This is where it gets really exciting to me. Because if you had an insulated tank that could hold the heat from the day, like right now it's 72 degrees in here. Okay. So if I could have a couple 100 gallons of water that was 72 degrees, this morning it was 35 degrees or something like that this morning. Okay, so if I had a few 100 gallons of 70-degree water that I could pump through basically a heater core, which is, you know, how your car heater works in the first place, and then blow air through that heater core, little radiator, I might be able to warm it up enough in here where I didn't have to run my propane heaters. Right? And so instead of me thinking about how can I run solar powered electric heaters, because batteries don't store enough energy cost effectively to run an electric heater. I tested that last year, or a year before now, I guess. I just wanted to see, that was one of the videos a lot of people commented on. Yes, a battery could run an inverter that could run a little electric heater, but its time was measured in short minutes, not enough to be useful. Okay, I kind of figured that, but I wanted to see, you know, would it be enough that you could buy enough batteries that it could work and not care about the cost because you'd buy them once and they'd last a few years, you know. In that respect, propane makes a lot more sense. $15 worth of propane will run me 2 or 3 weeks. That makes a lot more sense. It's not renewable though, I have to keep going to buy it. So that's something to think about. Okay. But if you could capture enough heat and store it in a hot water tank for your shower, and then the leftover you could use the next morning to at least warm up the bus a little bit, maybe you wouldn't have to run the heaters that day. These are the ideas that taunt me because I haven't had time to finish them yet. But you play with it, it seems like it should work. It's very easy to get pulled down a rabbit hole. There's a lot of people that have actually practical ideas, so I'm not going to say they're all, you know, pie in the sky, but a lot of the comments that I see, people are all excited about, oh, you should try this, you should try this. Some of them I actually have tried, some of them I've looked at, but the reality of it in my situation, I got to look at it from a point of view is, do I have enough time and do I have enough money? Once I had that system built, whichever it is, yeah, it looks like a great idea. Geothermal heating is another one. And I always get those two confused. One of them uses like geysers, you know, the actual hot water that comes out of the earth in some places. That's not the one I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to call it thermal mass heating. I've heard it called geothermal. Earth pipes, air pipes, water pipes. Basically, and this varies a little bit, and I haven't found any really good, accurate resources, but I know they're out there. I just couldn't find them recently. The idea is, if you go deep enough in the earth, it gets to a constant temperature. And I've heard numbers like if you go 10 feet deep, it'll be maybe 60 degrees, something like that. I could be off by a few degrees and a few feet, but you get the idea. The deeper you are, the more stable it is. With that said, what you do is you dig trenches, you bury air pipes or water pipes, and these have to be, one guy that I saw, I think he came up with, and he was experimenting, he did a pretty good job of documenting it. If you're curious, I mentioned this in another video a while ago now. The idea was, okay, so on Google or YouTube, Nebraska greenhouse grows citrus in the winter, something like that. If you search for that kind of a phrase, you'll find him. Old retired guy, he's in his 80s. He retired from the Postal Service. I just thought that was a funny thing because I am currently still working for the Postal Service, but for the last week kind of thing. So he did some different tests. He's got one for his own property, and he's teaching other people how to do it. And so he's experimented a little bit with depth and how long the pipe has to be. But the idea is if you have an air pipe under the ground, and I'm doing all these hand motions, I just realized they're too low. So you got your air pipe, you know, if you're up here, you go down 10 feet, and then you do 200 or 300 feet, and he was getting like big drain pipes, flexible black ABS pipe, I think is what it was. It's the stuff that's got kind of a corrugation in it, right? So it doesn't get collapsed. And it's made for running, like moving drain water away from your house is one of the uses for it. And I've checked the prices on it. It's not horribly expensive for the pipe. You can get it, a couple hundred feet to a roll or whatever. Different diameters, 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, whatever. Okay, so you'd kind of figure that out. Well, the idea is you blow air through this pipe with a big fan, and by the time it comes out the other end, it has matched, or what would be the word? It would absorb heat from the earth. So you could blow cold air in from one end, and by the time it came out the other end, the earth had warmed up the pipe enough that the air coming out the other end was stabilized at, say, 60 degrees. Okay. And that's not just from the sun shining on the ground, that's just the normal temperature of the earth at that depth. Maybe over time the ground has stabilized from the sun shining on it. But this guy had 60-degree air blowing into his greenhouse when there was 2 feet of snow on the ground outside. Okay. And all he needed to do is run the fan. He's not running a heater, he's just running the fan. And it takes a pretty good, like a furnace type big fan, or like the kind of fan you'd have for a greenhouse basically. But a really big fan. I think he said it was a 15 amp fan, so 2 horsepower or something like that. It would need its own 15 amp circuit breaker kind of a thing. Okay, so that's a pretty good load, but compared to how much electricity you would run, to run a heater, And in the summertime, this is the cool part for me out here in the desert, it does exactly the same thing in the summertime. So you blow air through this long pipe, and the air comes out at 60 degrees when it's 110 degrees in the bus, right? So instead of running a swamp cooler or running a air conditioner, you just run a big fan, and it blows air through this long tube, and it comes out the other end at 60 degrees. Well, this morning when it was 35 degrees in here, I could have been pulling 60-degree air into the bus just by running a fan. And that I could run off of the batteries, right? So that sounds like frickin' that's awesome, right? The problem is I would need a backhoe for a day or two at least to dig 300 feet of trenches out here. So that basically killed that project for now. But as soon as I'm at a point where I can afford to do that, heck yeah, I am all over that. Now there's something I am going to experiment with when I get to that point, because in reading about this, there was another effect where if you're closer to the surface, you can take advantage of the warm or cool effect of the day versus the night. Okay. And they say that it takes it a while for the ground to heat up in the morning, and it takes it a while for the ground to cool off at night. So one thing I'm looking at, if I'm going to dig a trench anyway, maybe I can bury one pipe at 8 or 10 feet deep, and then fill that up, and then at about 3 feet put another pipe in the same trench. So you got a deep one and a shallow one. And again with the microcontrollers, the Arduinos, I think it would be practical to measure the temperature on both pipes and pick one that was more advantageous to what I was actually doing. Okay. Another effect that's related to that was a project I saw. I didn't see it when I was in Canada, but they talked about it, and I realized it was done near Edmonton. And what they found was, because there's a lot of oil exploration there, so there's well drilling equipment like on every corner practically. It's one of the most common things you see is oil well derricks, kind of like Texas. So because they have the expertise there to do it, these guys started experimenting, and they realized that it was possible. They found an area that had just huge bedrock at about 400 or 500 feet deep. I mean, this was just a massive chunk of rock. All right. And what they came up with was they built a subdivision on top of this rocky structure. And on every carport, they put solar collectors. So some of them were solar electric and some were solar heat. Basically, I don't know if they were using brine or like antifreeze, you know. So the idea was you'd have these, same idea as the water heater I was talking about. They would heat up the water, pump it under the ground, circulate it through the rock, and then bring it back up again. And this was still in the testing phases when I read the article about it, but their idea was, over the time of several years, they figured it wouldn't be practical for the first 3 or 4 years, but eventually they could put enough heat into that rock that during the winter they could pull heat out of the rock again. And then the summer they would reheat the rock. And so what they were looking to do is to raise the temperature of that rock. And we're talking, a rock structure the size of like a football stadium. I mean, this was, they're talking a lot of rock. But over time they could heat up the rock and then pull heat out of the rock in the wintertime, right? So constantly adding heat and taking heat out. So it was, instead of a battery holding electricity, they were just heating up this huge structure, all right? Such that when it was 40 below, which is what it is up there in the winter, maybe they could run some of that heat into the houses, and the people in the houses would have to run less fossil fuels to keep warm, or natural gas is typically what they use up there. So, some apartments, in one apartment I lived in Edmonton, they had a central boiler, and kind of like the old apartments, they had the old radiators. It's kind of what this thing was, only a newer version of it. And so instead of running your own little furnace, you had this thing, and they actually did keep the place pretty comfortable. And then if you wanted to, you could, burn your own electricity and run a little spot heater, but it was actually pretty effective. So if you had some of those in every unit, that would keep the place comfortable, then your electricity would be less. And they also had solar electricity on every roof. So that would offset it, So where I was looking, if I could make solar water heaters work on the roof, or set them up the same way that my solar panels are made, but use that to heat water, okay? First you heat it up for your shower. Then you heat up, 200 or 300 gallons, and maybe use that to stabilize the temperature in the bus during the winter, such that when, like for instance now when it's 70, I could have water that was up to 70. Nighttime it gets cold, I could start circulating that water through the floor, radiant heating, or through radiators, heater cores. Turn on a little electric fan that runs on DC, blow some warm air towards the bed, that kind of thing, right? Well, the next step then is, what am I missing? Where's it? There it is. Stop it. I'm not going to miss those at all. The next step, if you had a surplus of heat, maybe you could get it to the point that you were heating 5,000 gallons of water. Okay. I mean, you think about the thermal mass of a swimming pool. It takes a lot to heat it. But then once it's warm, it takes a long time to cool down. And if you could build a tank, say that when I get a backhoe out here and I dig my trenches for my thermal air pipes, maybe I dig a 10-foot deep pit. That was, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could dig a hole that was like an Olympic swimming pool, right? And then insulate that and then build a roof over it and close it in. Have like an underground swimming pool. I've seen those before. That is, to me, from a cold climate, that would be the coolest thing ever. Come home after work in the wintertime when it's 40 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever, and you go out to your swimming pool that was solar heated all day long and all summer long, and it's warm enough to swim in. How cool would that be? If you had just off the top of my head, an Olympic swimming pool, hundreds of thousands of gallons, I think. You could do the math on that. How many BTUs of heat would that hold, kind of a thing? Okay. Well, if you had the ability for sun to shine on black pipes and keep that from getting too cold, and if it was insulated such that the cold air didn't get to it, right? Oh, then add in your greenhouse to that effect. The heated water would heat up your greenhouse. You could be growing strawberries all winter long or something. But it's expensive to build is the problem, you know. Even, I mean, relatively, you know, if you rent a backhoe, outside of the Home Depot one time, they had a little toy of a backhoe. It was tiny, but it was small enough that the average guy could rent it, tow it behind his truck, get it home, not destroy the neighbor's fence, getting it in, you know, dig a hole in the backyard, get it back without causing too much problems, right? But I think it was $500 for the whole week, something like that. Okay. So you could do it, you know, and if you rented a bigger one, it's just, they're not any more difficult to drive. You just, you know, it's just a few buttons and levers and you can figure it out. Now if you had to pay somebody to come out and do it, that's when it gets expensive. This is the kind of reason why I had to make the decision not to stay where I'm at. When I looked at how much money I was making it, but just kind of barely. And all of the great ideas I had were just out of reach. In the comments below, give me your favorite off-grid ideas of pie in the sky, free energy, free love, whatever. What are the things that you think would be the best thing ever, right up until you actually had to put the shovel in the ground and make it happen? And that's the kind of thing that gets me all the time is I see these ideas, you know, the research looks great. It's like, oh my God, you build it once, and this is kind of the point. If you could build it once, you would probably get, you know, 10 or 20 years of return or the rest of your life. That's what keeps me up at night. You look at that, it's like, yeah, this would work. That's kind of the point, I guess, is if you could make it work, and it should work, right? Intuitively, all these things work. The solar water heater experiment, I was so disappointed every time I tried it. Because in the summer you don't need it, that's when you got all the hot water. In the winter when you really need it, the problem is that water is 30 degrees when it starts. If that's how, you know, if it got down to 30 overnight, that water gets down to 30 pretty quick. I think the missing piece is you need to have a water tank that you could insulate and protect it from the coldest of the cold. And then get it out into the sun as the sun started to warm it and put it in the insulated box with a glass face. I think one of the slickest ideas on that idea, I talked about the insulated box. That seems like a good idea. Plexiglass would help on the face siding, you know, facing the earth, the sun, the shiny thing. I think if you could get a hold of a good price on like a sliding glass door that was double pane, that would be the way to go. Because if you had single pane glass, you would still lose too much heat through the glass. I mean, you would probably break even, or you know, it's better than nothing, but if you could get double pane glass, or what I was looking at doing when I was getting ready to start replacing windows, I was thinking about this, and I really wanted to buy plexiglass or acrylic or Lexan or, you know, name your magical transparency. With the table saw, I was thinking I could take a 2x4 and cut 2 slots into it. You know, cut one, turn the board, cut it again. Make the slots the same width as my plexiglass. It wouldn't be as good as a double pane glass, because what makes double pane glass works is they actually pump the air out between the glass panes, so it's a vacuum. Then it works like your thermos. You don't have as much heat transfer that way. But if you could seal it up well enough so that the air between the panes wouldn't move very much, you would have a better barrier than if it was just single pane. So that's a step in the right direction. That's about the best you can do on your own. But yeah, if you could, go find a place that had, surplus, if you had to buy a sliding glass door at retail, think about how much that would cost you. And here we go. I knew if I talked for 3 hours, I'd come up with the nugget. This is something that I do try very hard to do now. Look at it from as many different sides as you can. What's your break-even point? I'll use my water heater for an example. When I bought the water heater, it was a couple $100, I think. I got a small one. I didn't need very much hot water. I just needed to take a shower. I didn't want to have to heat. And here's the thing. If you're heating 20 gallons of water, you have to heat all 20 gallons, even if you're only taking a short shower. By me getting a 7-gallon shower, 7-gallon hot water heater, I only heat 7 gallons. Okay. So I really had to think about that for a while to realize that is, if you buy a big tank, it all has to heat. Now, if you're taking a 20 or 30 minute shower, yeah, you want a 40-gallon hot water heater or whatever the big ones are. But if you can condition yourself to just taking the short shower, you still have to heat all 40 gallons. And then by the next day, that water is cold because you're not running heat constantly. You got to get this through your head when you're off grid. Unless you just happen to have so much solar that you can afford to do that. But that's a whole nother video there. So what I was looking at is I have a $200 generator. It takes about 30 minutes roughly for that generator to heat up enough water to take a shower. Okay. I'm getting about a year out of those generators. The first one I wore out sooner because I didn't have solar yet. This last one lasted over a year. And it's probably going to last another 6 months. But now that I'm going to be gone, that helps a lot. Okay. So if I figure $200, let's make it $240. That means it's $20 every month to go towards buying a new generator. So that's $20. Okay. And then gas. I can figure out the gallons that I burn, but if I can run that generator for 30 minutes and make hot water to take a shower, that's not burning a gallon. So maybe it's burning half a gallon of gas. Okay. Right now gas is about $2 a gallon, so maybe I burn $1 worth of gas for a shower. Okay. And then however many showers you take a month. I'm not taking a shower every day anymore. I wish I was, but I just don't. And I just get to the point, I look at that generator, I'm like, I got to listen to that generator for 30 minutes while it heats up the water. And I'm like, it's, especially wintertime, I can go every other day and feel pretty good. Third day, I wish I had a shower. Okay. So you kind of adjust. The alternative is, how else would I heat that water? If I can heat water for $1 worth of gas for one shower, how long would I have to use something else to be cheaper than $1 a shower? Right? Now, if I could lay in a warmer day, like spring and fall when it starts to get warmer, 100 feet of garden hose is plenty of water to take a shower from. I've done that a lot. It works great. In fact, if you're not careful, it's too hot, right? So I can use my water system, turn on the pump, have the water go out through the hose. It goes around and around up on the roof, and then I bring it in through the window. I was doing that for a while. And I just turn on the tap, and the pump would start running, and the water would flow through the hose, and I'd have all this nice hot water spraying on me, and it works great. But you can't really control the temperature unless you have a second hose through a mixing valve, and then you can pull cold and hot. And one thing I found was you would have, because of the coil, some parts were facing the sun better. You'd have hot water, cold water, hot water, cold water, because it was going around and around. And you needed to work on this part of the system a little bit more. But it does work. Okay. If you can do that, that's pretty cheap. If you got to spend money to make it actually hot, you know, copper pipes and insulated tanks and everything like that, you may find that it takes you a year to get it altogether cheaper than just running the generator. Now, after a year, maybe you break even. You know, this is kind of the thing, is what you want to look at as a whole system. If you can spend a couple $100 and you buy the generator, and you buy a $40 pump, and you have a couple $100 worth of tank, and it's full of water, and you can turn on the pump and it pumps the water from the tank and it goes through the hot water heater, that's pretty easy, really. And it'll always work. That's the thing, is for me this winter, I know even if that water is right above freezing. Now if it's freezing, I got a problem because the pump doesn't work when it's frozen. But even if I have to run the pump for 40 minutes because the water is super cold, when the water is up to temperature, it's the same temperature. It's always going to be right. So what I found in my experience was wintertime, I didn't have enough sun heat, solar energy, to make the water in the hose warm enough to take a shower from. So anyway, short version of that, what I would say, if you have an idea, test it. Test it small and cheap if you can. The garden hose, you know, if you lay a garden hose on your driveway, the water coming out of it will be so hot you can't put your hand in front of it after 20 minutes, right? So that part seems like it works. But do the same thing in the winter, and then you realize what I mean. Now, if you could test this in front of a glass window, how hot could that water in the garden hose get if it was inside your house, so that the house was keeping it from getting cold at night? That would be the trick. So anyway, these are the things that keep me up at night. Yeah, cool. I'm going to go start the generator so I can run my dryer and dry my clothes. And I'm going to run the hot water heater so I can take a shower. Heck yeah. And here's the trick. Since you got the generator going anyway, look for anything else you need. Get it all done at the same time. Sometimes I put off showers knowing I don't have to do laundry, or vice versa. Yeah, make it worth your time. Alrighty, I'm not sure how much that's going to make it, so if you got anything useful out of that, I'm surprised, but hey, cool. Yeah, in the comments, post any of your ideas, crackpot or otherwise, of things that you have actually tested, or things that you've seen, or things that you think would work. Probably for the next couple of months, I'm not going to have much time to shoot real videos, so maybe we can work on some projects like this that we could do hypothetically and see what seems like it should work. And then later on, I'll come back and see which ones we can actually finish. That might be fun. Cool. Again, to all the new subscribers, hey, thanks for joining us. It's always amazing when I look at the numbers and see they've gone up. I'm like, wow, that's cool. Thank you. Questions, comments, always welcome. I do my best to answer them when I can. And stay tuned for the next one. Bye for now. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, that should work. Cool. I do things differently. Oh, and please, if you like any of this, it would be really awesome if you could subscribe and click that notify bell. Drop a comment if you have any questions or ideas. Share, like, comment, subscribe, notify. Oh, and Patreon if you're really an awesome kind of person. Thank you so much for watching.